All right, welcome to this second Being a Visual Studio Champ event. My name is Thomas and I will be your moderator for the day. The focus today is all about Visual Studio extensions, and for that we have some really special guests for you that will take you through how to use, how to create extensions. I know that they will share some of the best extensions, and you'll also see that our guests will share some of their very best Visual Studio tips and tricks. So a big thank you to our sponsors. Without them, we would not be able to have events like this. So thank you very much for that. So today we have some guests, but before we go about the event, let's take some house rules. So if you have any questions during the event, just raise your hand in Teams and we will make sure to pick it up and give you the mic during the event. The event will be recorded, so if you have any questions that you missed the answer for, you'll be able to see that on the recording afterwards. We expect to have the recording ready within a few days. Please keep a good tone in the comments and make sure that there's room for everybody. All right, so let's get started. So it's a great pleasure to have a really awesome setup today. With me first we have Mads Christensen from Microsoft. And Mads, I know that in just a minute we will give the word to you, and you will be able to talk a lot more about who you are and what you can do. But we have known each other for a long time, and I know that this passion about building stuff for Visual Studio have been something that have been a big thing for you for many years, right?
Yeah, for 12 years. I've been doing extensions for 12 years.
Yeah, and you have made hundreds, right?
Yeah, I think it's 170 something.
Yeah, that is impressive. We will hear a lot more about what you can build and how to do it in Visual Studio in just a minute. With us today, we also have Egil Hansen, who is a developer at Delegate, but also a Microsoft MVP. He's also the creator of BUnit, which is a test library for Blazor, and have been using Visual Studio for ages. So also a big welcome to you, Egil. Egil, I know that one thing you say that you are a shortcut warrior. Is that right?
Yes. Can you hear me? I'm just getting everything plugged in. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. And well, I like to think that I am. You know, I prefer to use shortcuts more than the mouse. If anybody is old enough on the call to remember Norton Commander from back in the good old DOS days,
Yes.
I've been using a similar tool for Windows for I think the last 25 years called Total Commander, which is also just you can do everything file manager wise with shortcuts, and thankfully Visual Studio is also quite liberal with the shortcut options you have there. So definitely they're not so easy to demo, but I'll try to show at least a few of my latest favorite ones that have been added to Visual Studio 2022 later on.
That sounds really good, Egil, and we're looking forward to that. And with us, we also have Martin, Martin Oates, who's the CTO and lead architect at Blue Fragment. And I know that Martin has a lot of good tips, and he's also our Visual Studio guy on the Mac. Right, Martin?
Yes, unfortunately, there's not that many extensions on the Mac, so I would say that is sort of vanilla operating the Visual Studio on the Mac. I also, as we briefly talked about earlier, I'm spinning up a lot of VMs with a pre-installed Visual Studio in Azure, and having that opportunity to just quickly go into a Windows environment with the full Visual Studio is something that you'll sort of miss once you doesn't have it around. So yeah.
Yep.
I still know a few tricks. I'll show you something from the back.
Sounds good. Sounds good, Martin. All right. So with that in place, I will actually give the word to you, Mads. Give us a good introduction to the amazing world of extensions.
Excellent. Thank you, Thomas. And thanks everybody for showing up. I have on my second monitor here, that's why I look to the side here. That's where the chat is. So I'll be looking over here as we go along. So don't think I'm not paying attention when I look here. It's quite the opposite. Well, hello everybody. So my name is Mads Christensen. I'm on the Visual Studio team, and I have been on various different teams in the Visual Studio larger team for 12 years. So Thomas and I, we go back, I'd say at least 15 years, back to the old Copenhagen.net user group days in the, I don't know, mid 2000s or something like that. So it's an honor for me to be here and talk extensions with you. And I don't know if any of you have tried to make extensions before, or maybe you think that, hey, that's kind of a black box kind of mystery thing. Or perhaps you've given up, you've rage quit because it was too hard, and you know, it is hard. Or rather, it was harder. It's gotten a lot easier. So I want to take you through, like, what are some of the changes that we've been working on, and what are the sort of the nice happy path to writing an extension today in 2022. So let's just jump right in, and I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to move Thomas away. There you go. So first of all, there's been a huge push from the community, the extenders themselves, to come up with a better way of writing extensions. And that kind of culminated in an extension for writing extensions called Extensibility Essentials. So this is the latest version. This is for Visual Studio 2022. This is the thing that you need. The only thing you need for writing extensions that is now going to make everything a lot easier for you, because it's going to set everything up, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So Extensibility Essentials, go install that. Once you do, we can go ahead and create a new project. And if we filter to extensions, which I already had, okay, let me zoom in here. We can see I'm getting a bunch of templates here for writing extensions. These are the ones that are built in. These are, let's say, the old ones. But the ones that comes with Extensibility Essentials all have the word community in them here in parentheses. So there's quite a few to choose from. And I'm going to grab one here, Visual Studio, a V6 project with command. So V6 basically means Visual Studio IDE extension. That's what it's short for, V6. So often people use the word V6 when they talk about extensions, and it's the same thing. It just means Visual Studio extension. So we're going to take one with a command, and I'll explain what that is as we go in here. Let's just call this Champs, this project here. So here's what I get. I get a C# project. It has a couple of references. It has some build tools. So this is pure MS Build magic that builds our artifact. That is a Visual Studio extension that we can share with other people. And then we have two things that is called community.visualstudio.something. And they are part of this community effort in making it easier to write extensions. And we'll take the details of that. They then depend on, or have a dependency on, the official Visual Studio SDK. So we get the entire thing, the entire Visual Studio SDK is still there. We can still code against it, but we can also code against the toolkit, as we see right here, which is what we want to do. So that's kind of a wrapper layer to make everything easier and nice. We got our command. Then we got a package. So let's just very briefly look at what a package is. A package is a kind of an entry point to an extension. It's sort of the anchor point of an extension is what's being initialized when Visual Studio starts up or whenever it needs to initialize your extension. Then it has a V6 manifest where we can put in our metadata, such as like our product name, what do we want the title of our extension to be, author, version number, nice description, and so on and so forth. And finally, we have a VSCT file. So this is the Visual Studio command table file. And this is where we define commands. So what is a command in Visual Studio? A command is, you can think of it as a button. And that's exactly what this says in here. It says button. A button and a command is the same thing. So anything you can click in a menu is a command and a button, right? So what we get out of the box with this project template is that we get a command here called my command. So your button text is my command. Let's just zoom a little bit in case some of you are on a smaller screen. So this is the button text. We have an icon associated with it. And this icon, I can actually see, I get IntelliSense for icon. This is coming from the Extensibility Essentials. So you get tooling, you can see what are the various different, and if I go back here, I get them all. Right? You can really see them all here. So there's Visual Studio ships with around 4,000 icons, and you are free to use any of them. In fact, I would encourage you to use them if you can, instead of using your own, because then you make your extension feel very native to Visual Studio. And finally, we have a parent. So where are we going to place this command? We're going to place it in a parent group. And this parent group is defined up here. It also has a parent called VS Menu Tools. That's this menu here. And if we are in doubt, we can just hover over where it says Tools, and it will show us in a tooltip exactly where we're talking about here, the Tools menu. So that's really nice. Again, this is coming from that Extensibility Essentials. I can come in and see, like, what about View? Or if I want to put something in, View Other Windows, I can just search for Other Windows, and I can see it right here. It shows up here, the Edit menu, so on and so forth, right? So I get a visual representation of where things go. So if I want to put something in Edit and then into Cut Copy, the Cut Copy group, I can just select that here. Boom, like that. So very easy to place, and we're just going to keep it up there, but we're going to we're going to keep it up in Tools. Just, actually, should we put in Edit? So let's put in Edit and put it in, what should we put in? The Cut Copy group. Yeah, let's just do that. Because what I want to do is I want to just create an extension that insert, so GUID. Okay. So let's run this. I'm going to hit Control F5, just like you would any other C# project, right? Let me follow along here in the chat. Is it possible, Bakali asks, is it possible to build an extension using another language like JavaScript? It is not possible at the moment to do that, and there's no real plans for it. So it has to be .NET. .NET is the delivery mechanism for extensions, but there are ways you can do stuff in JavaScript as parts of your extension. So you can run it out of process. You can run things on Node if you want, that communicates back to the main Visual Studio process, for instance. So you can do various things in JavaScript, but the way you register your extension has to be in .NET. Okay, so now a new Visual Studio showed up here. So we hit Control F5, and what happens in an extension project is that it creates a new instance of Visual Studio called the experimental instance. And so now, if let me open a file. Actually, I don't care. I'm just going to go to Edit, and hang on. Let's go back to Tools. Let's just use this. Insert GUID. Hit Control 5 again. So let me just explain what happens. So Visual Studio is building our project, building our DLLs, and putting it into a v6 file, which is our extension file. It then deploys it to what's called the experimental instance, and then starts up the experimental instance. So now our extension is installed. And if we go to extension, manage extensions, we should see one here called, if we go under installed, we see champs show up right here, right? That's the one we're working on. And under tools, I have one called insert GUID right here. So you see, I've practiced a little bit and already have one. So you see, I click it and it just said, hey, button clicked. That's all it does. So let's figure out what we're doing here. So our package, which was our entrance, it already registers our commands. So we can just add as many commands and we don't have to care about registering anything that was already taken care of. So all we have to do is to modify our command handler. And my command handler is pointing to this my command. That was what it was called in our VSCT file, right? We called this my command button. So I get that right in here. And this is nice and async because we're dealing with this new toolkit API that makes sort of some of these older concepts of the Visual Studio API, async, modern, .NET friendly, C#10, all this sort of niceness that makes it really easy to work with. And so now I can start working. Now what I want to do when I click the button is I want to get the current document that's open. And then I want to insert a GUID into the selection. So if you have a selection, I want to replace the selection with a GUID. And if I don't have a selection, it just inserts right at the caret. But in Visual Studio, there's always a selection. It might just be that the selection is zero length selection. That's the same as no selection. So first of all, let's get the document. And so what I'll do is that I'll zoom in. So let's get what's called doc view. So we're going to await. Now here's the cool part. VS dot. So with the toolkit, I get a root object called VS. I can just dot my way through to see all the APIs to get everything I need in Visual Studio. So I'm going to get the current document. Get active document view async like that. Okay. And then now that I have the document, I guess I should get a selection. I need the text view. I need the selection. So let's do that. So var selection equals doc view dot text view dot selection. Thank you, IntelliCode. And I'm gonna get. Is there something here? Selected span. So you can have multiple selections. So, for instance, I'm now selecting something. Oh. $12 something. Do this. Right. So now we have our selection. I'm just going to use the first selection like that. Let's create a GUID. Var GUID equals GUID.new GUID toString like that. Oh, I'm not checking for null here. I should check whether or not doc view exists. What if no document is open? But we're just gonna not do any of that right now. So let's go in and say doc. We're gonna replace the selection, right? So doc view dot text buffer. So text buffer, that's the text itself that's in my document. I'm now gonna replace what's in my selection with my GUID. That's it. What? Let's run it. If any of you have done any extension work before and you haven't seen this new toolkit, this should shock you how easy this is. It's easy for me to say, but this is really night and day over what it was. Okay, so let's just open a file. I have a random file here. Let's tools, insert GUID. Boom, it inserted a GUID. Good. Now let's select something. I'm going to select this first line here, and then let's try it again, see if that works. Enter GUID. Boom. And it replaced that with that. So now we have a fully functional extension. I can ship this to the Visual Studio Marketplace. Go to the marketplace.visualstudio.com and share it with the world, or share it with my colleagues. The artifact that I need to get is if I go to and look in my bin directory, then I have champs.v6 right here. This is the one. This is the file. You want to make sure you compile it using release configuration instead of debug. That shrinks the size of the v6 here. But other than that, this is ready to go. This is now I can share it with people. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that is actually really, really nice. Was it yourself that wrote the extensibility essentials?
Well, it's a collaborative effort. I started it. It's something that I've been wanting to do for many, many years. And I did it with the community. So I had a show on YouTube called The Hacking Visual Studio. And before that, it was called Writing Extensions with Mads. And so a community kind of formed there. I can see we have Jan here. I don't know if it's Jan from the V6 community from Australia. But if it is, like he was also part of, and a bunch of other people some people wrote code for the toolkit, and some people just, hey, we should make sure that it adheres to these principles, or it does X, Y, Z. And so it became this very collaborative effort. And right now, the toolkit, if we go take a look, it exists on a org called V6 Community. And so there's different repos in here. The toolkit, there's template pack, there's something for dependency injection, there's samples, this is the VSCT thing that I guess we're not going to go into that right now, but the idea is that this is an org that is by the community for the community to make it easier to write extensions. And when the new extensibility model comes out in Visual Studio in the future, in 3 years, 5 years, whenever it is, the idea is that we can still it will be a sliding transition off of the toolkit, so it's built with in collaboration with the extensibility team in the Visual Studio org, right? So, I'll recommend everyone to get on the toolkit, and then that sets them a little bit up for a smoother transition into the new extensibility model once it becomes available in far down the line.
Mm-hmm. We got a few questions. One was regarding the instance of Visual Studio. Is that a safe mode instance, or is it like your normal instance? Just
yeah, good question. This is the experimental instance. No, it's an instance that is in its own hive. So it is separate from Visual Studio, meaning whatever extensions you have installed. So there's two types of extensions. There are per machine extensions and per user extensions. Most extensions are per user. Those extensions are not installed in the experimental instance. Your settings are not moved over from your regular Visual Studio. So you can have the experimental instance might run a different color theme than your regular Visual Studio. But it's a little known feature of Visual Studio that you can create any other hive, any other sort of sliced version of Visual Studio than your regular one. It's something called root suffix. So if you drop to the command line, to the developer command line, Visual Studio command prompt rather, and you type devent.exe to start Visual Studio, then don't do that. Pass it the root suffix parameter and give it any name you want. So if we look up here, this one says exp. So I have a preview, so I get int preview here. It says internal preview. But exp comes from Visual Studio started devent.exe / root suffix equals exp. You can say equals Thomas, equals foo, anything you want, and you get an instance of Visual Studio that has never been started up before, let's say, totally clean of all your settings. It doesn't write to the same registry location or anything like that. So, and you can come back to them. Once you come back to one you've already had, like those settings that you made there are still there. So it's kind of neat. So it's clever to use for presentations. So you can have a demo mode that has like certain font sizes, certain themes selected and whatnot, and so have that separate from your regular Visual Studio.
Yep. Nice. Really nice. We also got another question regarding the documentation for extensions, because as Egil remembered really well, then documentations back in the days was not that good.
Right.
And how is it these days?
Well, it hasn't really changed a lot. So all of the newer stuff is actually pretty well documented, but the old one he's right, that hasn't changed. So what I would recommend people doing is to go to v6cookbook.com. That's the website I got open right here. V6 Cookbook. It is also a website that is written by this same V6 community on how to use the toolkit, how to use the extensibility essentials. And it takes you through the very beginning, like getting started, like what tools do you need to get? It even has videos for all of this, right? So if you're like a visual learner or you want to get something demystified, I really like videos because it in like, these are like 2-minute videos. In 2 minutes, they tell me I can see what effort is involved for me to do this task. So even though I want the written documentation on how to do it, that doesn't always give me like, I don't know what the effort is involved here. But the video shows me really quickly, oh, it's just that. Okay, good, I can do that. Yeah. And then it has a bunch of recipes, how to do menus, how do you do tool windows, how do you theme tool windows to follow dark and light theme and all that sort of stuff. It's all here. Tips and tricks. How do you deal with project solutions? How do you build stuff? And then finally, how do you publish to the marketplace? Or, you know, it's all here well documented. So this is the starting point, v6cookbook.com. That's where I would recommend. And it actually links out. So at the bottom, usually in a lot of these, there are links into relevant documentation on the official documentation. So if you want to dig further, you can go in and look at some of that.
Nice. Yeah. Also a question regarding security. So is it safe to use extensions, or is there a risk that it's a phone home extension? Is it possible to see the code or what?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you should think of it as any other piece of software you install, because it does run with whatever trust you've given the Visual Studio process. So if you run Visual Studio as an admin with admin privileges, your extension will also execute with those privileges. So so you could you can do whatever you want in an extension. There's no sandboxing going on. So think about it as you would any other piece of software you install. A lot of them you can see extensibility essentials here. If you go to the marketplace, a lot of extensions these days they're open source, and so you can go check it out. But often you have a reason to trust the author or something like that, or it has a lot of stars, and people do report abuse. So you can report, like down here, there's a report abuse to the marketplace saying, hey, this extension is not doing things right. And we do get those sometimes, but usually it's just people don't like the extension. I had an extension I wrote many years ago, Thomas. You probably remember this one, called Farticus. It is the original Visual Studio fart app. So it will basically fart sound out of your speakers whenever the build failed. And people would report abuse on that one. They thought that was in bad taste.
But it was actually quite fun.
Yeah. So but we haven't really seen like any malicious extensions. So
okay.
But yeah, treat it like any other piece of software.
Got it. All right, Mads.
There was one. Can I just do one thing about there was one about how do you debug? Mm-hmm. So I hit Control F5 to run without debugger attached, but now I hit F5 to run with the debugger attached. And so it also starts up my Visual Studio. I can set a breakpoint. And so if I go in and, like I debug any other app, I open a file and I execute my code. Where is it? There. And it hits my breakpoint. So there's no difference debugging this versus any, like, let's say, WPF app. I hope that answers that.
Yeah. One final question, Mads. So you have placed the extension in the top menu. Is it also possible to put it in the right-click menu?
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
And I have a bunch. This one down here, for instance. I put this one in here. Open in Visual Studio Code. So sometimes you want to open a file in VS Code, like for whatever reason, or open a folder full of Markdown files or whatever it might be. Yeah. So yeah, you can put any place there are commands in Visual Studio, toolbars, menus, context menus. You can put them in all of those.
Nice. So, Mads, I need to ask you, what is your favorite extension?
Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
This is the one that I cannot live without. So let's say I want to add a new interface to this project. So I would go in and add new item. So I know the keyboard shortcut. So does Egil for sure, right? Egil, what is the keyboard shortcut for adding a new item?
It's I think it's Shift F2.
Aha!
I don't know. It's in my fingers.
No, you're good.
Don't steal my extension, man.
Oh, are you doing that one?
Yeah, but you can do it. I can skip that one.
No,
It's your
I'll
own.
do it. I'll do a different one. So here, let me show you. Let me show you one that I use all the time, because I use GitHub all the time.
But
So-
yes, let's just clarify what it was. So there's no doubt that adding new files, you do that a lot to a project, and that takes a lot of time if you use the normal way around, right? And you made well, I guess the most famous extension ever, where it's just Shift F2 to add any new file. You just give it a name, and it'll automatically figure out what to put in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let me show you my one of my absolute favorites as well. So this is the brand new Markdown editor V2. So the second version of that. And it's just like you would expect from a Markdown editor experience in Visual Studio. You have your source on the left, and you have your rendered output on the right. And of course, there's scroll sync. There's all sort of stuff. There's nice features like I can right click here and say generate table of content, and then boom, we got table of content, and so on and so forth. There's just a lot of nice things here. So if I want to write a list, so list, and if I hit enter again, it kind of it gives you that sort of a Word like editing experience for Markdown, and it's just really this one has the most five-star ratings of any of my extensions. Like it has 30 so far. It's not very old. It's like a couple of months old. It has exclusively 5-star ratings and has 30 of them. And most of them say, hey, I didn't know how much I needed it till I used it. And that's how it is for me. Like once I don't have this, I'm like, it's like feeling naked, It's like something is missing. Sorry for giving you a mental picture that you didn't need. But that's how I feel, without this. So I think
that's
the one
really
I wanna-
cool. It's sort of levels up the Markdown experience to Visual Studio Code levels. I think that's was really nice.
Yeah, and this also lets you, if you have a monitor that's, some people have a monitor that they flip, so it's like very like vertical.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have the preview window underneath. So if I go into settings, so right click Markdown settings, I can take this and move my preview window location instead of the window location being vertically aligned, I can do it horizontally. So once I do that and I open the file again, why doesn't this show up here? Okay. It will do the right thing. So as you would expect. So now it's underneath there. All right. So
Nice.
a lot of flexibility, and yeah, I can highly recommend this.
Awesome. That is worth a go, definitely. All right. I saw that we got another question. So how do you register keyboard shortcut to an extension? Do you have time for that?
I can do that really, really quickly. So we go back into our VSCT file here where we defined our command, our button, right? And then I'm just going to write key binding. And there's a snippet for that. And so they all have all commands are GUID and ID based. So the GUID here was champs. and see I get IntelliSense for this. Thank you, Extensibility Essentials extension. And it was called My Command. The editor is usually always something with like this one here. This one, it's weird. I don't know exactly what it means always, but this is what you need. You get IntelliSense, you're good. Okay, and then what do you want the key to be? So let's say you want Control A. That's obviously taken, right, for mark everything or whatever, select everything. But let's just pretend it's Control A. So we do A and Control, and you do get IntelliSense for this, by the way. And there is IntelliSense for this. And maybe that's the only thing you need. Then you can remove these other two key combinations like that. That's it. But what you want to do first is that you want to go to Tools Options. You want to go to Keyboard. And then you want to go in here and then you want to see if it's available. So let's hit Control A. Oh, Edit, Select All. That's taken. Darn it. So what else? What about Control? So we can delete. What about Control F3? No, that's taking Control 9. Okay. What about Control K9? Oh, that one is nice. So K9. So if you have that's like a dog, right? K9. So if you have like a dog-related extension, for instance, this would be a really good keyboard shortcut. Yeah. And then you can register Control K9. And so the way you could do that, so Control K, and then key 2 would be, what was that? 9. I don't even know how to write 9. It's in here somewhere. Here are all the F keys, blah blah. 9, and then the moderator 2 is Control again, right? So also do something like this. What if it was so Control A, but what if Control Alt A was available? Then you just do it like this. And if I did anything wrong, you would know, because you should be able to. Yeah, you get a squiggle. It tells you it was wrong. So this works.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much, Mads. It's been really great and quite interesting to see how much have happened within the last few years in the extension ecosystem. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. Next up, we have Egil. Egil, welcome to the stage, and I will actually give the mic directly to you.
Okay, and I'll just share my screen right away. So the extension that you so blatantly just shipped everybody off to was this one we saw before, Add New File, and it is by Mads, so that's awesome to have him on the call and say thank you for that. It's my first extension installed every time I install a new Visual Studio. And for folks who don't know what it does, if you want to add a new file, maybe if you even want to add it in a new folder, what you do is you make sure you are in the whatever position you want to start at, and then you just do Shift F2, and you won't see that because I'm just hitting that key combination here, and that pops up this menu, and I can zoom in on that so you can see it. It's here, this one here, and there is a syntax, so you can basically just type in a folder. If you want to create a folder, you can do something like this, and then end it with a / I don't know if backslash actually works, but I'm just defaulting to / because that works. And
they both work.
They both work. And if you hit enter, then it creates a folder. If you need something more, like you need a new test file, for example, you type in the name of that file, and if you give it a .cs ending, like we did here, well, then Mads has sort of, I guess you hook into the template system that are already there, so it'll basically take the default C# template and spit that out for you. So that's really neat, and it works with, you can also create your README Markdown files, and it will. Oh, it already exists. Okay. To do. Let's do a to do then. And you get a Markdown file. So it's super efficient, and it's like if you're a keyboard warrior, you save that time, like right-clicking and choosing Add and New Item. It takes a little while. It spins up, and I'm on a very fast machine, so loading all those templates in, it's just much faster. So I can't live without that. So that's the first thing I want to show you. Second thing, I have is another mass thing. I don't know if you have all the credit or you just pulled in the resources that actually does this, but Zencoding is sort of a way where you can easily, if you're building markup like in HTML files or in Razor files, Blazor files, then you can sort of type out. I think is it called Zencoding, or it had a different name originally, like that syntax, ML or something.
It originally was called Zencoding like 10 years ago, maybe more. And then it changed its name to Emmet.
Emmet, yeah, that's right. So it's just nice, especially if you want to quickly spit out extra, levels of HTML like this. Or I don't know if this is official part of Emmet, but the ability to just quickly fill in Lorem Ipsum stuff, that's just the brilliant stuff there. So actually, I don't know if you like that, but let me just copy paste these into chat as I go, so people can find them. So I can quickly jump in here. So if we have our index page here, we can do a div with a class of h1, for example, and just hit tab, and then it sort of fills out for you. And you can go, you saw even more examples before that. So it's sort of a, and this is I guess this is what's the word I'm looking for here? Oh yeah, this is a Git Copilot that starts coding for me. So that's also a favorite, but we can get to that later. The next one, this is an extension by Martin W. Smarter Paster, and it's available in different versions for different versions of Visual Studio. And it's really useful if you want to copy and paste things especially where you might want to escape things, or if you want to copy paste a bunch of stuff in there that has a sort of you want to paste as a comment, or there's different ways it can escape for you. You can also copy paste as string builder. That's pretty cool. So, for example, like with so in BUnits, this is a BUnit test. We might want to, in C# land, we might want to verify the markup that it matches the expected output. So this test fails because it's actually not right. The real markup is this. And you will see here we have these, what's the English word for that?
Quotation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long day already. So I just copied this. And if I go back here and paste this into the string, well, first off, this is wrong, but it's not important. So here we have some problems, right? We have to go in and manually escape. And if it's a bigger string, then we have to, that's got to be lots of those things we want to work around. The alternative is to right-click and then go down to paste as, and then you have the different options here. And in this case, I would want to use this one, and it does the escaping for you. So that's super neat. I use that quite a bit. So the next one I had for you was XUnit code snippets. So as Thomas mentioned in the beginning of our stream here, I built BUnit testing library, and I quite like writing unit tests. Well, I don't. That might be a wrong word, but I don't feel smart enough not to write tests for my code. So that's why I do it. And just having some code snippets that will save me a little bit of typing, that helps. So with the XUnit code snippets, you get some autocompletes, like you can type fact and hit tab or defact, and you hit tab again, you get one of these. And there's also theory and tab, and so on and so forth. So that's just a small little thing that makes your day go faster. So I'm all about that. So that's also super useful. I actually haven't done that before, but at least at one point I had an extension where you can build your own code snippets, shortcuts, and that might be built in now. I can't remember. No, but that might be a good extension for somebody to write. So it's easy just so you have a sort of a tool window where you can set up. And if I have this extension, then this code snippet keyword, then it'll pop in this template. Another one I really like is the output enhancer. Sometimes when you build and you have lots of projects going on in your build, it's just nice to get the output colorized, almost like if you're building in a terminal with the right color support in there. So it highlights warnings and errors for you, and it sort of makes it a bit easy to read. it's kind of hard for me to show it before and after without having to restart Visual Studio, but you sort of see down here that things turn green, and if we have a build failure, it'll also show you that, and like you see in the example. So that just makes things a lot easier to sort of quickly pass through and find in the output log, which I for some reason have to do quite a bit. Another thing I really like is, because I'm not great at spelling, so having somebody check my spelling for me while I'm writing comments or code, that really helps. And so this extension is fairly good at that. It's not a word level of grammar and spelling, but it does the job. I think it's based on sort of an open source spell checker. It would be awesome if we had something that could be a bit more advanced, like we have almost like text predictions, or we have things like we have in Gmail or in Outlook or in Word. I don't know how easy it would be to integrate with that or pull that in, but this catches a lot of things for me. So if you have something like a comment where you just spell things wrong, well, then you get some squigglies right away, and you can just control dot to it and find you get the suggestions like you do with all of the other types of code suggestions you would have otherwise. So it's super useful. I am just blasting through these. Another one from Mads, which is super useful, is the tweaks 2022. There are also ones for previous extensions. It's sort of correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a playground a bit, where Mads will try out new features that might make it into Visual Studio proper. It might also just stay in the tweaks extensions, and some of the features that were in the previous versions have made it into the Visual Studio 2022. So with this, you get things like let me just double check the wrong things here. Yeah. So if you go in here, you can see some of the settings, and this is quite a lifesaver with when you're basically building a Blazor project, because sometimes the Blazor compiler sort of gets stuck in its own ways, and it doesn't notice when you've deleted a component and created it again, and it's sort of and that's because there's stuff left in the bin in an OBJ folder, and then you could do a clean build or a solution build, a solution clean from Visual Studio, and that will also remove those files. So that helps a lot. Another one I'm using quite a bit is where did that go? Save on format on save here. Where was it? I had it somewhere. Anyway, there is an option in here that will basically, when you format, use your Control K, Control D, or Alt Shift F, I believe I rebound that too. So when you basically go in and reformat your document, then it will run whatever code cleanup you've set up in here. So in my case, when I just format my document, it will remove the unused usings, for example. So it's just a nice thing to really have available to quickly clean things up. Another thing I also sometimes do, especially when the Razor compiler or the Razor editor in Visual Studio gets confused, is that I go in here and I get the restart menu, which I believe was at least originally part of the tweaks extension. I don't know if it's built in now, but that's really useful. Just restart everything and take me back to a clean slate. And that also helps sometimes when especially Razor editor gets stuck. And I know it's a super hard problem. I know you have colleagues, Mads, working on a new version of the Razor editor that will, and there's also an experimental version out there that should improve things, and that it does improve things quite a bit. But it's a complex problem to sort of have to build something that both does C# code and does markup and can also do CSS and HTML, CSS and JavaScript in the same file. And what you can even do in here is you can make what's it called, a para. You have some markup in here that is just written like this, which is something that also challenges a bit when you say you can just go ahead and create markup in line, and that's legal. So this becomes a render fragment now. And all of those things where you have markup inside of C#, inside of markup, it's a hard problem, but it does sometimes need a little bit of help. So that's why the restart option is very very handy. Okay, so another thing, it's just something I've been trying out recently. So that's code maintainability, and it's sort of if you are a little bit OCD about code quality and you want to sort of sometimes if you dig a hole, if you start coding and you get maybe a little bit too far into a method and it starts bloating up, then you can have this extension sort of give you a warning and go from a green flag to a red flag and say, it might be time to refactor this bad boy. So it just sits there on top of your methods. So we can see an example here, and you will normally, for example, for test methods, you generally want cyclomatic complexity to be 1 because you don't want any branching in your tests themselves. So it's just some like a helpful tool, and I don't know how much I actually use it, but because at some point when you get experienced enough, you sort of you get that sixth sense, you get that code smell tinkling feeling. But it's something I've had good success with also when I'm pairing with colleagues and sort of sharing that and pointing to that once in a while and say, I think we are getting a little bit out in the red zone here. So that's really good. Let me see.
All right, Egil, time flies.
Okay. I will. Okay, so if we have more time, a little bit afterwards, I can get back to you. But other than that, I can leave the word to the next speaker then.
Yes, and thank you so much for that. That was quite a good walkthrough of a lot of extensions, and I know that I noted a few that I'm definitely gonna try out. Next up, we have Martin, who will also share a few tips.
Yes, I will do that. Quickly screen and drop into my VM. Hopefully you can see Visual Studio by now. Actually, I want to start off both where Egil left off or where I left off on the last the last time we talked about code styles. And how you set up code styles. That is not an extension, but something you set up in the normal configuration. But what I want to touch upon shortly, on top of that, of your code style setups, you have now the possibility to do cleanup, and your code cleanup. Still not an extension. We'll come to that later. But you can configure this code setup or code cleanup. So this will automatically do a cleanup compared to a lot of predefined rules. And this will also look into the settings you've done for your code style. So I'll just select a bunch of these, and some of these you see that refers to a variable preferences. So that is the preferences that I've set in my editor config file over here on my code styling. So if I were to run this, and this is just some basic class with a few squiggly lines already. You see the squiggly lines because I have that editor config for the style rules set up. So I'll just easily click this button. It automatically runs through the code and does all the cleanup for me. And if we quickly need to save that first, and then we can quickly inspect the diff, you can see that it's automatically changing a lot of code for me on cleanup. On running this. This can be done per file, or I could right click over here and say I want to do the code cleanup on the entire project or solution, and it will go through and do that. So pretty neat feature. It might have been a extension before, I don't know. But if we look at the extensions, I see that someone we know had at some time done an extension for this. But as you said, the experimental list, I think this might have been on the experimental list before, but now it is actually moved into the options. So if you go into the text editor and into the code cleanup, you can just set that checkbox, press OK, and then it will execute this code cleanup every time you save your file. So I guess there's hope if these and every one of us does extensions that it might make into this real product of Visual Studio. That is a pretty nifty tool. I think it's pretty cool. It was an extension. I will try to add or talk about an extension now then. I've been working with mobile apps for quite some time, and perhaps I should do the add new item to see the slow way. Usually there is a lot of work going into if you want globalization in your apps, not only mobile apps, but other apps as well. So if I were to add a resource file, let's add that, and I wanted to add keys or text or labels in a lot of different ways, this is what we get out of the box. What I found is if we install the open, I actually want to open this with the X manager. I get this little tool down here, and then I can just start typing away. I can add keys. I can import something. So I just did a little TV kitchen kind of style, and just before it should work. Oh, I see I have not selected the file. I need to open that one in the engine. Okay. Apparently it's being hit by the demo box. Cool. Oh well. So that kind of didn't work. Once you select and open up the right file, as it worked an hour ago, you can edit all the different languages in a kind of nifty UI tool down here, and you can import and export your resource files into Excel or TAP or whatever kind of configuration you want to run. So we have configuration for it, where you can select how and you want to export it to plain text or single sheets, multiple sheets. It has a built-in book for translation. So if you have an Azure account where you can use the Azure resources for the translation of the Google, you can quickly just type that in, and then it will do the translation for you. So let me just quickly see if I can make this work. That would be kind of nice. I have to open up that window again. Okay. Sorry, that kind of failed on the demo part. Sorry for that. So that's what I had.
All right. But that also looked really good, Martin. It also matched that we are almost about end of time for our event. Any final shortcuts or extensions we need to know about?
I have a very important one. It's building off of Mads's Fart extension. No, it's actually built into Visual Studio now. Let me quickly share my screen, because that was actually the most important thing. I was saving that for last, but you didn't give me enough time. That's okay. I forgive.
So sorry.
Yeah. So if you go into the sound, the good old sound control panel. I'm in Windows 10. I don't know if it's changed for Windows 10, Windows 11, but in Windows 10 you have the sound control panel, and you can go in here and you can find the Visual Studio section. And you can actually set up different sounds for things that happens. And I don't know if you can actually hear this. Okay. I've hooked up with Homer, and he helps me when my build fails, or if my test run fails, or when things go well, when my test pass, then I get that. And actually, it's not just a gimmick. I started as a gimmick when I was doing Twitch streaming, because then people would sort of have something to laugh at when I, can't get my code to compile. But it's actually something when you're sitting there and just looking at your code, and you hit the Control-Shift-B to build everything, and you keep working, and it's building it sort of in the background. You get that message audio through your auditory channel, instead of having to sort of switch over and having to look someplace. And same with tests. So it's sort of it's actually not just a gimmick. It actually helps sort of productivity wise as well. So that's a small thing.
That's a really good one, and it's a good idea to have the visual or the audio part of the build included, definitely. All right. Yes. Anything else we need to know?
I have a question for the paste duck. What was it? Smarter Paster.
Yes.
Can that also? I know it's a standard feature in Visual Studio, but I really like that if you have JSON content in your clipboard and you can paste that directly into C# classes. Is that also available in that paste smarter?
No, it doesn't include that. But yeah, as you say, it's built in. It's more about escaping things or representing things in a way. Sometimes you want it as a comment. Sometimes you want it as what's what I'm looking for. You can paste into code, but it will paste in as a string builder. So if you have a whole bunch of text you basically want as a string in C#, then it makes it easier for you to get it into a constant or something else.
All right. So with that, I will say a big thank you to our 3 presenters. It has been really great, really inspiring to hear you share your knowledge and your wisdom. So thank you so much for that. If any listeners didn't get it all, don't worry. It has been recorded and we will share the recording in a few days. Remember, you can also always reach out to us if you have any questions you forgot to ask. I also know that you are very welcome to reach out to any of the presenters directly if you have any questions directly for them. So that was our second event in the row of being a Visual Studio champ. Next time we will take a look at the tools on top of Visual Studio, like ReSharper, for example, and talk a lot about tips and tricks for those. So here we go. After the event here, you'll get a short survey. Please fill it out. It means a lot to us to get some feedback for the event. If you want to participate in the next event, you can sign up directly at bit.ly/VSChamp3. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And otherwise, I just want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. Again, they are the reason why we can do events like this. And a big thank you to the presenters. A big thank you to all of you who have listened. A big thank you to our moderators here behind the screens. So thank you so much for being part of it.